Coming up next on KPBS Evening Edition, a consumer watchdog group is being sued by two former employees. We'll have the latest on the UCAN case.
And a video produced by a San Diego group has set an internet record. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Joanne Ferrian.
I'm Dwayne Brown. Two former employees of a San Diego watchdog group are suing the company, alleging financial mismanagement. The head of the Utility Consumers Action Network, or UCAN, says he's looking forward to airing it out in court. UCAN is in the process of being broken up or dissolved. KPBS reporter Amitha Sharma is in the news center to tell us more about the lawsuit. Now, Amitha, the case was filed by two men who've been with UCAN for some time. Who are they, and what are they alleging in this suit?
Dwayne, the men are longtime staffer Charles Langley, who specializes in gasoline price issues, and UCAN's one-time attorney David Peffer. The employees allege that UCAN Executive Director Michael Shames failed to have the group's books audited, did not report tens of thousands of dollars in bonuses on IRS forms, and moved hundreds of thousands of dollars for an outside party. These ex-employees of UCAN want a judge to force its board, the UCAN board, to provide a financial accounting of the group's books.
We're bringing this lawsuit to save UCAN. We want to correct the wrongdoing and the breaches of fiduciary duty that have occurred over the past year and more. We want to turn around the organization. We want to ask Michael Shames for an accounting of all of the funds and all of the benefits that he's received, of the money that went through the secret accounts, of the bonuses he collected, of the money that went into hedge funds, high-risk hedge funds. We want to see where the money went.
And Amitha, what is Shames saying about this lawsuit?
Well, Shames says instead of annual audits, he had an accountant review the books each year, which saved UCAN thousands of dollars. He admits that his bonuses were not reported on IRS forms, but he says the accountant messed up, and he called it a harmless mistake. He says the movement of hundreds of thousands of dollars from a company called Nucor was part of a grant for UCAN to help produce a documentary with Death by China Productions. Still, there are a lot of questions as to why the money was passed through UCAN instead of going directly to Death by China Productions. Now, it should be said that in addition to this lawsuit, UCAN is also the target of an FBI investigation into its financial records.
KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma.
San Diego Gas and Electric is disputing a claim that it cut spending on power line maintenance before the 2007 wildfires. The utility says it increased its spending on electric operation and maintenance between 2003 and 2007. The company's lines have been blamed for starting several of the fires, and victims who lost their home are suing SDG&E. The victim's lawyer says he went through SDG&E records and found reductions in spending for power line maintenance. A company spokeswoman says she doesn't know where he got those numbers.
Some grim numbers from the county medical examiner tonight. Suicides increased last year to the highest level in 23 years. The report says the highest suicide rate was among men 85 and older, but suicides in the 20 through 45-year-old groups were also up. The medical examiner cites several possible factors, including the recession and post-traumatic stress among returning military veterans.
The San Marcos Unified School District has agreed to pay $4.3 million to settle a lawsuit by the family of a brain-injured high school football player. Scott Evelyn was injured during a game in 2007. The suit claimed Evelyn's coach put him into the game despite being told Evelyn had a severe headache and couldn't focus his eyes. Evelyn collapsed 30 minutes later and has needed constant care ever since. Unemployment went up a little in San Diego in January, but it was still lower than it had been a year ago. Here are the numbers from the state. 9.3% in January 2012 compared to 9% in December. The state says the biggest job losses were in the retail sector with the end of the holiday season. In January of 2011, the jobless rate was 10.5% in San Diego County.
The San Diego Padres CEO has withdrawn his bid to take over a controlling share of the franchise. The team says it's a move to expedite a TV deal with Major League Baseball. Jeff Morad still has 2 years to complete his acquisition of the Padres. That deal also has to be approved by baseball's owners. A video produced by a San Diego group is now the fastest growing internet campaign in history. The group Invisible Children produced Kony 2012 to draw attention to African warlord Joseph Kony. He's accused of kidnapping children and forcing them to be soldiers or sex slaves. The video's gotten millions of views online and the attention of celebrities. Today, internet tracking firm Visible Measures dubbed it the viralest video of all time. This chart shows how the views started taking off earlier this week. The company says if the goal was to make Joseph Kony famous, they achieved it. The field of candidates for San Diego mayor is official. Joanne has a look at the race and at the renewed controversy over contraception over at the Evening Edition Roundtable.
It has all the makings of controversy: religion, politics, and sex. We'll talk about the latest in the birth control debate. But first, San Diego's mayoral candidates. Bonnie Dumanis touts her experience in San Diego. Nathan Fletcher cites his decision-making in the Marines. Carl DeMaio wants to reform City Hall. And Bob Filner, the lone Democrat, says he has the leadership skills to tackle the mayor's office. Joining me to tackle the issues are Andrew Donahue, editor at voiceofsandiego.org, and Elisa Joyce Barba, editor at the Fronteras Desk. Thank you both for being here. Andrew, let's talk about what kind of campaign this has been so far.
It's actually been pretty tame. There hasn't been a whole lot of fighting, but what you have really are 4 high-profile, pretty well-respected people with strong backgrounds running and with very different ideas of what they want to do for the city. And I think that's great for voters. You have Carl DeMaio really focused just on city finances and pension. You have Bonnie Dumanis really just saying, I'm going to be a leader. She's very light on specifics, and she's not really necessarily an ideas person, but saying, I'm going to be sort of the administrator of this big operation. You have Nathan Fletcher really positioning himself as the, sort of the next generation of leaders, plus a guy who's negotiated with Al-Qaeda. And then you have Bob Filner, who's saying, I'm the Democrat, vote for me because I'm a Democrat, and by the way, I want to do something cool with the port.
You know, it's interesting, you talk about how different they are. We know this is a nonpartisan race, but we, of course, can't ignore party affiliation. 3 Republicans. Do you think it's going to have a big impact when it comes to the primary? I mean, do they end up splitting a vote? Could we end up with Republican versus Republican? I mean, how could this play out?
I think we could very much end up with a Republican versus Republican. The thing to point out is that those little R's and D's aren't next to people's names on the ballot, so you can't just sit back and rest on your laurels or your party affiliation. Even the 3 Republicans, though, are very different. So they're differentiating themselves both from sort of how conservative they are versus moderate, and also just the ideas and what kind of leader they want to be. So I think everybody's different enough that you could have 2 Republicans.
You know, for a primary election, the voters who come are voters who are interested, voters who've paid attention. It's generally not a huge number of people. But the thing is that all these 4 names are very well known in San Diego, and they're always been bandied about. So I think that you're going to get there and you're going to see a ballot. People are not really going to pay attention whether it's Republican or Democrat. They're going to look at the names they know and the people they've heard of, and that's how they'll vote.
The other interesting thing about this race so far is education's been thrown into the mix for probably the first time really in a mayoral race, because as we know, it really doesn't come under the role of mayor. Why? Why would a candidate for mayor want to introduce this issue into their campaign?
I think it's a good question. It's that initially that's what pops into everybody's mind. Well, the city has its own bunch of problems. Why would you want to take on all these other ones at the school district? But across the country, mayors are getting very, very involved in education to the point where they control school districts. You're seeing it in to varying different degrees in New York, in Chicago, in LA. So it really is something that the urban leaders across the country are jumping into.
And when you have a school district that's teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, I mean, this is not a good image for the city, right? And so if you can come in and if you can really restore some functionality to the school district and you can make it a good school district, it draws families, it draws jobs, it draws business.
Do you think it draws voters? So if education, that's all we're hearing about. So now suddenly they can get in on this and maybe I pay attention because I'm a parent, I'm at home and I'm going to listen to what they have to say?
I think so. I mean, if you really look at what both the campaigns are focusing on and just what, if you're out talking to people and just talking to normal residents, it seems seems like the big issues are jobs, potholes, and education. And so I have no doubt that the reason that candidates are moving towards education isn't just some sort of warm feeling in their heart, but because their consultants have told them people are going to vote for this if you appear to be a leader for it.
You mentioned jobs. They're all talking about jobs. And it's funny because a few years ago, I remember even covering City Hall, that it was almost a question. Does the city council or the mayor have much to do with job creation? And in this race, it's an issue, isn't it?
It is an issue, though it is still an open question, really, how much they have to do with it. They can sort of nibble around the edges, but they're not going to have the impact that even a president would have by any means. But every one of them is making it a huge issue, and they've all sort of put out different ideas that really just kind of reinforce those images that I talked about at the start.
But I think ultimately it comes back to education. I mean, I think if we can improve our educational system here in the county, then we're talking about bringing in jobs, being able to send people to Qualcomm and to the biotech industries to provide the kind of labor force that innovative industries need.
Okay, we're going to move on to our other big story this week, which is San Diego Congressman Darrell Issa, who stepped in it when, as chair of the House Government Oversight Committee, he scheduled a hearing on the federal health care mandate, a mandate that would make employers offer contraception with no copay as part of health insurance benefits. Catholic institutions objective. ICE's panel on whether that mandate infringed on religious employers produced howls of derision when the panel turned out to be all male. You probably know what happened next once Rush Limbaugh got into the fray. So, Elisa, let's pick it up from there now. I'm sure our people at home have heard about this already. We have conservative radio host Rush Limbaugh calling a Georgetown University student a slut because she supports access to birth control. How's this going to play out, do you think, in the Republican nomination?
Well, it's been playing out, Joanne. It's been playing out very loudly and very interestingly, I think, to everybody who's watching. What's been interesting is, well, a lot of conservatives object to the mandate that religious institutions may have to pay for contraceptive coverage. Of course, Obama kind of cycled that back, and he said, okay, you don't have to pay, but you have to be able to refer people to another institution that will provide that kind of coverage. But that's seen widely as an assault on religious liberty and perhaps a constitutional issue. But Rush Limbaugh took it to a whole different level, which is what was really interesting. So he was really attacking this woman for sexual promiscuity. And what has been again, interesting is that the Republican nominees or the Republican campaigners for the Republican nominee for president haven't denounced him. They basically didn't like the way he put it, but they were kind of lockstep. They went along with him in terms of criticizing her for her so-called sexual promiscuity. And I think that has been very shocking to a lot of women, women who, I have to admit, I have practiced birth control in my life. So maybe, maybe I'm biased on this, but I mean, the idea that by practicing birth control that you are suddenly, a slut or a whore, or that you are sexually promiscuous does not track for most American women. So I think there's a shock factor that she is being attacked and that people are not coming down on Rush Limbaugh like a ton of bricks. Like, you must be kidding me. Well,
the other surprising thing in this debate in this day and age is that when women are speaking about access to birth control, they're often saying, well, this is a health issue, and that, women take birth control for other reasons other than for birth control. And that seems somewhat surprising that women still feel like we have to kind of say that in supporting this.
Well, and they do, because look at who's controlling these discussions. It's a bunch of men. That was one of the things that Issa was most heavily criticized for, was a panel of all men. When you have TV stations up there talking about it, it's all men. All the candidates running for president are all men. And I thought Elisa brought up a great point, that when you heard Gingrich and Santorum talk about Limbaugh's comments, they actually were defending him, saying that it was the elite media that was jumping on him. And so it really shows you, I think, really how socially conservative the Republican Party is right now, and how much that's actually driving the presidential race, it was shocking to me that we were sort of talking about these sort of social issues that I think a lot of people thought we'd moved past.
Well, and I think it is a strange thing. It's an easy thing, I think, for men, whether it be Newt Gingrich or Mitt Romney or anybody, to basically say, women shouldn't practice birth control. What actually they're not saying there. They're saying we shouldn't pay for birth control. Mm-hmm. But I think, in
But
their
that
lives.
could be the same thing depending on your situation, right?
And there's a number of people. Santorum, I think, is one who believes in the rhythm method as opposed to using any kind of medical means to plan your family. But I think that it's the women in their life are all practicing birth control, so they can get out there and they can make pronouncements on this. It's a little bit more difficult, I think, for women to come out against this.
So where are the women? Yesterday there was a very small demonstration. It was International Women's Day in San Diego. Not a lot of women showed up. Is this just, do we have a whole generation of young women who take this for granted? Where are the women?
Absolutely. Women, it's not just our generation that takes it for granted. It's a younger generation. It's all the women that have come up in the last 50 years. We do take it for granted. And I think that there's a great deal of complacency about where women have come to. I think if you look back 50 years where we were in 1965 when birth control was legalized to today, and the amount of women who are running companies and who are judges and who are on the air and who are doing all kinds of important things, there's been huge just a sea change in terms of women's role in society. So we do take it for granted, and I think what's going on right now is a fabulous wake-up call, because I think that if somebody like Rick Santorum becomes president and begins to restrict access to birth control, which is very possible in this world, I think that you'll see a lot more women on the streets.
Okay, Elisa and Andrew, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for being here.
Normally they stay behind the lens, but some famous photographers went in front of the camera to share their stories and photos with a San Diego photographer. We'll hear from him in just a moment. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
I'm Ray Suarez. On the next News Hour, the national job picture, plus the analysis of Mark Shields and David Brooks. That's Friday on the PBS News Hour.
Hi, I'm Billy McLaughlin, and I hope you'll tune in for my concert, Starry Night with Orchestra Nova, right here on KPBS.
Premieres March 18th at 8 on KPBS.
The American people
have named PBS
the most trusted source of news
and public affairs
for the 8th year
in a row.
Trust.
The American people have spoken.
Thank you.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Irwin Jacobs and by
The Show Your Love San Diego campaign generated more than 30,000 responses from throughout the county. Organizers were seeking public feedback on what's needed to accommodate 1 million more people in the next 40 years. Early results from the online survey show people are concerned about water conservation, accessible transportation, jobs, and affordable housing, as well as high-speed rail and building a new university in San Diego's South Bay. The county's population is expected to grow by 1.3 million people over the next 40 years.
We all know that iconic photo of the Afghan girl on the cover of National Geographic, but we don't know what the man who took the picture looks like. But now we do, thanks to San Diego photographer Tim Mantuani. He's been on a labor of love for the past 6 years, making portraits of the photographers who created some of the most famous images in recent history, and he joins me now. Thanks, Tim, for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I was reading about this project, and the first question that came to mind is, how did you convince all these photographers to be in your pictures?
Oh, it certainly wasn't easy, and it was a process. The first person I photographed was legendary rock and roll photographer Jim Marshall, and once I photographed Jim, then he opened another door, and it seemed like that was kind of the process, as one photographer led to the next, which led to the next, and I kind of gained the trust of certain people, and then the doors would slowly open and it expanded from there.
And what led you to this idea, this concept?
Well, I grew up shooting on film, which seems, dating myself now. But this Polaroid camera that I shot this project with is this monstrous 20 by 24 inch Polaroid camera. And there's a handful of them in the United States that you can rent. There's one up in San Francisco near where I grew up. And I just wanted to try to shoot with it. As digital technology came in, I really got away from shooting large format and kind of using the tools that were kind of like the blacksmithing of our trade. And now, even with digital technology, everything's kind of down to a 35mm camera. And all the time I get people like, oh, my brother has that camera, or my uncle has that camera. So it was a sense of working with a medium that was kind of vanishing and in a format that was totally unique to the professional market that not many people had shot with.
Hey, you got to tell us how much this camera weighs.
Well, there's a couple of them that Edwin Land made back in the 70s, and originally it was to take pictures of the shareholders at his meeting. And the film, it's the peel-apart Polaroid, came out of the factory on these giant rolls. And someone said, can you make a camera big enough for this parent roll of film? And so it all started from that. So there's a handful of them. I think there's 5 remaining. And I just said, what the heck, let's try this out. And once you shoot with that format, you just totally get hooked. It's an instant poster, just bigger than life, and there's nothing like it. Even shooting digital, it's instantaneous, but it's not in a printed, tactile type of nature that this process is.
And it's huge to lug around and heavy to lug around.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah. So now, some of these images that we'll recognize, some of them are quite famous. Tell us about some of them.
Sure. Well, there's the Afghani girl, as you mentioned, arguably one of the most famous portraits of all time, Steve McCurry from National Geographic. Bill Epridge's photo of the Kennedy assassination at the Ambassador Hotel. Nick Utt's picture of the girl being burned by napalm in Vietnam. Jeff Widener's Tiananmen Square tank man photo. And it kind of goes on from there. There's a wide range of pictures in this project. Will Wegman, who shoots all the Weimaraner dogs. Sports photography, Neil Leifer shot of Muhammad Ali, Sonny Liston. But then there's also other genres of photographers and photography that aren't as mainstream, like a local photographer, Grant Britton, who kind of pioneered skate photography, skateboarding. So it's a wide range of subject matter.
It's not just the photo too, right? Isn't there sort of this handwritten little story beneath these photos?
Yeah, that was kind of a spontaneous thing. The first day I shot the Polaroids with Jim and another photographer, Michael Zagaris, you have this giant instant print, and it was kind of like, just hit me like, well, why don't you write a little story about the picture on the bottom of the frame and then sign it, because I certainly couldn't afford to purchase their originals, so this was the closest I was going to get. But it really became an interesting part of the project where you got to see their handwriting, and I think it's really telling about their personality. Some guys that are totally type A, it's perfect architectural type and no misspellings, and then other people are just like grab the Sharpie and write and cross it out. But that's one of the things I love about this project, is that it's not perfect. Everything is so spell checked and photoshopped and refined now as far as photography. So this was kind of a way to embrace the photographers as they are and show them with some sort of equal weight to the photos that they're known for.
And usually they're not known. And I read a quote in one of the articles about you that you've been pointed out, look, even their names, the credit that a photographer gets is so tiny. And now they're sort of out in the open. What kind of insight did you get about these photographers in doing this project?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and a lot of these photographers, some of them like Adita Sherman is 99 years old, and Julius Schulman, who did a lot of the architecture photography, passed away recently. He was 98 when I photographed him. The big thing I learned is that they loved photography, and their individual passions took them to pursue a certain genre of photography, and they just stuck with it their whole lives. And over time, for myself as a photographer, I've realized that you're building this time capsule. What we go out and shoot today, that seems very commonplace, 50 years from now will seem extraordinary to a new generation of people. So it's exciting to see these people that spent their life pursuing their passion and really creating a body of work in this time capsule that will never be repeated.
Well, you've created a really amazing and beautiful book. And for people at home who want to know more about this project, they want to see these photos. Do you have a website?
Sure. A lot of the pictures are on my website, which is mantowani.com, MANTOANI. And there's also a video about the project on behindphotographs.com.
Great, Tim. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
than 2,000 journalists, more than 70 international news bureaus.
Benazir said she knew the risks in coming back.
Get the bigger picture from the world's most trusted news and information source. You want the full story? Watch BBC World News.
Watch BBC World News weeknights right here on KPBS.
Throughout its 50-year history, KPBS's news and public affairs programs have challenged conventional thinking. We're investigating issues before they reach a crisis. Our world is much more than just today's headlines, and KPBS helps all of us explore what's next so that we can take action now.
America is 300 million people using power, eating food, going places, and making things. I'm Yul Kwan. Join me as we see why making life easy is harder than it looks. This is America Revealed. Coming in April, only on PBS.
Welcome back to the Public Square on KPBS Evening Edition. As you heard at the roundtable, San Diego Congressman Darrell Issa made headlines 3 weeks ago when he held that controversial all-male hearing. Issa represents the 49th District, which spans the area between Fallbrook and Rancho Bernardo. KPBS first requested an interview with the congressman back on February 16th. In fact, we sent a total of 5 emails and made 2 phone calls in the past 3 weeks requesting an interview with Congressman Issa. The only response we got was this from his press secretary earlier this week. Are we interested in the food stamp investigation? Well, we did send a reply. Actually, we're interested in that oversight committee meeting the congressman held. You know, the one that everyone is talking about. So here is our public invitation, Congressman Issa, asking you to do an interview with one of your hometown stations. We can Skype you from D.C., or better yet, we know you'll be in Vista next Tuesday for a Chamber of Commerce event. What would you like to ask Congressman Issa? Send me an email, jfarian@kpbs.org, or you can also follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook.
Recapping tonight's top stories, 2 former employees of the Utility Consumer Action Network, UCAN, are suing the watchdog group. They accuse UCAN's leadership of financial mismanagement. San Diego Gas and Electric says it did increase spending on power line maintenance years before the 2007 wildfires. The company disputes a claim by fire victims that it cut spending. And a video produced by a San Diego group has set a new internet record for views. A tracking firm says the Kony 2012 video is the fastest growing internet campaign ever.
You can watch and comment on any of the stories you saw tonight on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.
We leave you with a look at the forecast.
Good night.